Right, we are live. Um, well, we're live on YouTube. I don't think we're live on Twitter. Um, Seems to be some sort of error. Temporary. Wait, okay. So I think there may be a problem with the Twitter. Not to worry. Um, but we are live, which is a good start. Oh, we got somebody in chat. Hello, Mark Shansky. Good to see you. Right. I think we'll just give it a few moments. I'll try again with the Twitter one, but I don't know. It's not looking promising at the moment with Twitter. Um, I tried to. So was it that new feature where you can sync it up with Twitter, but it doesn't seem to work. Um, Not to worry. We'll, I'll try it again another time, perhaps. Anywho, thank you everyone for tuning in, and I'm back, of course, and to carry on with our Greek mythology series, which has sprouted up. We're going to talk about tonight the story of Echo and Narcissus. Um, of course, some of you probably have heard, Narcissus is, of course, the one who fell in love with his own reflection, his own beauty, and Echo, well, Echo, of course, is the nymph who was known for the well, for the echo. So, but the themes tonight are quite interesting because they are different from our previous episodes. Usually, in those cases, it was quite mutual love. It was a mix of passion and affection. But with this one, it's actually quite the opposite. In this instance, um, the uh, there really is no affection between the two, and both suffer the wrath of well, Hera and the goddess Nemesis, because out of pure jealousy. Um, so yeah, I mean it's actually very much a story about self love and I guess sort of an inward looking uh, inward looking theme. I would say it's very relevant to the current sort of state of modernity. If I would, the sort of current state of people. So yeah, we'll get into it. Um, Starting off, uh, the story of Echo and Narcissus um, is probably you know one of the most enduring tales in Greek mythology. It has been adapted and retold over the centuries hundreds of times, and of course represented in art throughout the ages. It's a very well known, and it's a very um I want to say tragic, but it's again I would say it's more of a story of the warnings of self love and unrequited love, which it wasn't seen as a positive virtue for contemporaries at the time. So Echo was a nymph from Mount Corythion. in Boeotia. The parents of the mountain nymph are never made clear, but she was educated in music, but anyway, educated in sort of the art of music. Um, Beautiful in her own right, Echo was chased by both Apollo and Pan, who of course have made their sort of debut appearances on the show in previous ones, um, especially Pan. But would shun their advances, and although Zeus did not chase after Echo, he made use of the mountain nymph, for while Zeus would have his way with other nymphs, Echo would talk for hours with Hera, um, Zeus's wife, distracting the goddess from Zeus's indiscretions. So basically, she would distract her, um, and she was a very good. Uh, she was, I would say, she was very much of uh, exceptional talent to sort of silver tongue figure. Um, Hera would eventually recognize the role of Echo and discover what was going on, or come to the suspicion of what was going on, um, enabling her husband's affair. And so Hera would curse Echo so that she could no longer have a voice of her own, and the nymph would only be able to repeat the words of others. Um, and that uh, you know, she would ultimately be confided to mountains, um, where of course, places where we hear our echoes. And of course, because of her ways of, uh, you know, persuasion, her persuasion techniques, that sort of skill, ironic, was that was taken away from her by Hera. Um, so we move on to Narcissus. Narcissus was a handsome youth from the city of what was it, Thesipia, um, or in Boeotia, and was generally considered to be the son of uh, what was it, Ptolemea of Cephas, and um, another nymph as well. Although occasionally Narcissus was named as son of Endymion and Selena. So it depends on the story. Again, these stories have been retold in their time for um, over the years. Um, when still a child, the blind seer uh, uh, Teresea made a prophecy that Narcissus would lead a long life as long as he did not know himself. Um, Although the meaning of this is not altogether clear. Um, I would say, go when we look forward, on the meaning of not knowing himself. I guess it it will be made clear, and we'll get to that point later on. But it is made quite clear, probably what that prophecy would be. Uh, so the meaning, I guess, the meaning of it, you could argue, um, not mean was not to look upon himself, uh, which fits his downfall, um, or it could be he would have to remain humble, which of course he wasn't, especially with interacting with women who he very much was. He was a very picky guy. um, and so he would grow up to be amongst the most beautiful of all mortals, with a beauty on par with that of Indian Adonis, who we again featured on this channel, um, and Hykathius. Narcissus would become a deer hunter, but his beauty brought forth many admirers, both male and female, and mortal and immortal. And so we start with his interactions with Echo. One of his admirers of Narcissus was Echo, for after being cursed by Hera, the nymph had wandered through Boeotia and glanced the youthful Narcissus whilst being hunted, uh, falling immediately in love with him. With no voice of her own, Echo could not call out to Narcissus, but eventually the um, Narcissus sensed that he was being watched and called out. Echo could not respond to the question, "Who's there?" and could only repeat the words of Narcissus. Um, and so she couldn't even really interact with him properly. Eventually, though, Echo left her hiding place and came face to face with Narcissus. Narcissus was incapable of loving anyone but himself, and Echo was cruelly rejected. Echo fled back into the mountain woodlands and faded away, leaving only the remnants of her voice behind. So I remember in one tale, um, uh, there's uh, um, Narcissus says to her, "I don't love you," and the only bit she repeats back to him is "love you, love you, love you." So I remember reading that in one text, which I thought was quite interesting. Again, sort of playing on the idea um, that the sort of miscommunication, but also the sort of power of words in this interaction. Um, and so after that, we have to look at Narcissus' other admirer, which is it was a young man called um, Ammonaeus. Um, he was sort of a fellow youth who'd also fallen in love with Narcissus, but also was spurned. Ammonaeus would take the rejection as badly as it could be taken. Um, the youth would commit suicide in the doorway of Narcissus' home, killing himself with a sword that had been given to him by Narcissus. Um, though it, it is believed in the tale that um, the young man Ammonaeus called upon the vengeance of the gods, particularly Nemesis, to uh, curse Narcissus because of his you know his cruel rejections, and I guess Nemesis felt that that he pulled this stunt too many times with both mortals and immortals, and so ultimately he uh, was you know cursed. And so when Narcissus came to a pool in Thespia to drink from its waters, the youth saw only reflection in the pool and fell in love with it. Narcissus was unable to obtain the object they had fallen in love with, just as so many suitors of Narcissus had been rejected. Narcissus would die of sorrow by the pool, despite the pleadings of the uh, the naiads and the dryads who had observed Narcissus wasting away, so, other forms of nymphs and such. Um, a funeral pyre was built for Narcissus by the nymphs, but when it came to place his body, the his body was overgrown by these flowers, the Narcissus flower, which uh, you some of you, if you keen uh, keen sort of countryside walkers, you may come across these. Um, there is an alternative version. I do remember of his death. Sees uh, that Narcissus recognizes the unquoted love that he had for his own reflection, and now brutally aware of the pain and suffering that he had caused to so many Narcissus, um, sort of falls on his own sword, just like the young man uh, Ammonaeus, the sort of want to be suitor did. Um, And then I think there's one where he just falls into the water and drowns. But I do like the idea of the flowers, though, sort of, is sort of being consumed um, by nature. Um, I mean, that is the story in a nutshell. Um, I do think, though, look, going back to his sort of obsession, because uh, Narcissus was obsessively staring into this reflection, even when he went down into the underworld, when he was on the the boat with the boatmen and looking into the ocean, the sort of endless ocean of the underworld, still contemplating his uh, own beauty, and um, completely absent from anything else around him or going on, or his own personal well-being, because of course he starts to waste away, and that's what sort of is his own undoing, because he no longer can garner any strength, because he's just not, he's not eating, he's not drinking, he's not doing anything apart from just staring at himself. um and uh of course the prophecy that we mentioned earlier, um where what was it, uh he would live a long, he would have a long life as long as he uh did not know himself. And that sort of harkens back to the you, you sort of referencing the the future, that him in search of knowing himself purely on the merits of his own beauty, is it sort of brought him to a sudden and quick end. um I picked the thumbnail for this stream. It was, of course, if you, some of the Eli watchers will look at it and say that it's not, that image is not set in any sort of ancient Greek ascetic setting, and no, it's not. It's sort of like a modern um, rendition of that. But one of the things that I think why the story's so important, that I think about it now is, and I'm sure people watching will know people, especially younger people you see on TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and all these other things. Um, there is that sort of narcissus level of behavior, where the only quality of life and um, that they can have is the sort of obsession of their own, and the maintaining their own beauty. And I think what drove Narcissus to what I would describe as borderline insanity was that his obsession was not just of his own beauty, but that snapshot in time. And I've seen, I've known a lot of uh, men, especially those who rely on their looks, and also women, mainly women though, but men as well, who um, wish to maintain that sort of snapshot of the best years of their life, and can't accept the inevitable changing. I mean, I would say in pop culture, you might think of who I think of, like Madonna, for example. I mean, how the facelifts and plastic surgeries and everything. She's ended up she's ended up sort of becoming, I think, the opposite of well, she's becoming the opposite of whatever what beautiful and youthful is. But I mean, yeah, overall, I think it quite clearly sort of demonstrates the the I think Narcissus' obsession with his own beauty, and then of it maintaining um and ultimately withering away while contemplating, is somewhat, and there's a running theme, is like a his own sort of revolt or um, re- refusal to accept that the natural order of existence, um, and the gods, like in previous streams, will act accordingly, with mortals when they don't adhere to that. Um, I mean, of course, also Echo was punished in all of this as well. Um, and she would ultimately be consumed by the mountains and valleys, ravines, and would serve out the rest of her, you know, eternity, um, being the echo of being the echo. Um, I'm just going to check. I don't think I'm going to remove the Twitter stuff because I don't think that is working at all. Um, is there anybody in chat who has any questions at this point? I'll just give it a few moments. I mean, next time I will. In the meantime, though, I mean, uh, my ultimate one, which is preparation, is just going to be the Baron and Luthien one from the Tolkien's Silmarillion. Um, that will be the ultimate one uh, when it comes down to it. Though at the time, I'm enjoying the Greek mythological tales. I mean, they are short. They are short to go through, but um, nonetheless, they are. You know, they are. I think quite. There's a lot of depth to them, and you. I am critical of the modern youth, but I think in this particular tale, there's especially with Narcissus, he is like the embodiment of the Zoomer social media influencer type. He's sort of like it's sort of like it was an ancient sort of love letter to this generation. Um, I don't think there's any questions at all. I mean, this is going to be a very short stream then. Be a very short stream, but that's okay. Uh, because this was something I wanted to read. I wanted to get out there and have my thoughts on it. I think final thoughts on this. You know, I think on the concept of love, it does it does. You could look at it in one context and argue that Echo and his male lover were both their jealousy played, its negative impact on the story, but in some ways Narcissus's behavior was really his undoing, because he had angered the gods by his constant rejection and the abuse of his own beauty. Um, really, I would say it it put him on the course which what was inevitable for you know it was is one of those things where it's an inevitability, um, especially by a nemesis. So yeah, um, and you know, I do think he does demonstrate. Remember, this is all in the context of like a sort of pre-Christian uh, pre-Christian tale, but he does represent that sort of vanity without using the word narcissism, because of course that's where it sort of derives from. But vanity, self-love, um, that he ends up sort of become blind to everything else, and then when his ultimate, because it's revealed to him that his ultimate desire is actually himself, and he falls in love with his reflection, um, and is ultimately is consumed. And I think it does sort of provide a warning that and I think the problem, and I've talked about this before, is that the problem with much of the modern world is that people are too proud in themselves. Um, there's a lot of vanity about that is promoted um, in society, and it makes you see people in you know uh, influential figures in entertainment and politics and stuff who are you know uh, beloved for whatever reason, but they end up really depressed, really, really disconnected, um, and lose any sort of compassion. And I think a big part of that is sort of what the tales of the Narcissus was getting at. That you know when you have that sort of level of beauty, I mean, where do you go from there? There isn't really anywhere to go, and then you look inwards, and you again became some self-absorbed that yeah, in his case he withered away. In other people's cases, it's usually them, you know, um, getting older, or whatever. I do think it's interesting though that his ultimate downfall. Also, not uh, that his obsession. I wonder if it does play in the concept of time, in the sense that he was obsessed in a particular time and place, a snapshot of himself, because it wasn't showing past or future. It was just there in the moment. And of course, I mean, in some of the tales, the reflection is actually more of an illusion than anything else. Um, but so it may not even have, one could argue, was it really him he was looking at, or was it just a version of himself um, that he believed others would see, or he would see that that would is the ultimate one to desire. Because of course this was a curse from Nemesis, so there is always, you always have to put in with you know those sort of gods the sort of level of deception and skullduggery. Yes. Anyway, thank you for everyone who will be watching and who've watched, and I think that's probably about it. I wanted to keep it nice and short, and yeah, it was quite nice and short. Um, I will be doing a few more streams soon. I plan to do, as the say, the next one on this sort of theme is Beren and Luthien. I think now it's the Greek ones. I'll continue, but the next one is going to be Beren and Luthien because that's the one that I've done quite a bit of research on. There's a separate standalone um, uh, Christopher Tolkien narrative story on this. There are several papers and essays, and of course the chapter from the Silmarillion that I've been reading for this. So I've wanted to cover all basis of the story. Excuse me, the story, um, and the relationship between those two characters, to be able to make sure that I don't lose any important information in different texts or anything. Because it's I think in the Cimmerian, I think it's one of the more interesting ones because and this is just an early analysis from it, but there the love that spouts between those two, it it actually is in a time where there is great darkness and hopelessness in the world, um, and it their sort of their relationship and their sort of unrelenting love for each other, um, is, I guess you could say, is a sort of spark of light, hope, goodness, and beauty and everything in that. Of course, Baron he loses everything, but we'll get into that uh, later. And he's actually a bit of like a Robin Hood style figure in some ways, uh, in the outset. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you all later.